This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today, we'll feel and experience Vroman's Bookstore in Pasadena, followed by an interview with indomitable Joel Sheldon.
We have, by the way, before me, going back to Mr. Vroman, a long and deep connection to the community, not just in books, by the way, but our civic involvement. It's pretty special. It is. So we've committed to the local community for sure.
Yes, and the store has done so many charitable events. It's really uncanny how much the store, Vroman's, has given back to the community, back to the city.
You're absolutely right, especially if we go back a couple of generations and add it all up. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to experience Vroman's Bookstore? It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in November 2019 in Pasadena, and Vroman's, a place that had long been a refuge for book lovers, was buzzing with life. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the comforting scent of old and new books, and the excitement in the air was palpable. A large cake sat in the middle of the store, adorned with the number 125 in elegant icing. Vroman's wasn't just celebrating an anniversary. It was honoring 125 years of stories, memories, and community. The year was 1894 when Adam Clark Vroman, a man of vision and heart, opened the doors to his small book, stationery, and photographic supply store on Colorado Street. His love for books and his deep-seated desire to give back to the community had driven him to this point, but the story of Vroman's didn't start with success. Mr. Vroman had moved to Pasadena from LaSalle, Illinois, in hopes that the warm California climate might help his wife Esther recover from her illness. Tragically, Esther passed away just 2 years later, leaving Adam devastated. In his grief, he sold his treasured book collection to raise the capital needed to open a bookstore. It was a decision born of loss, but also of hope, a hope that a small corner of Pasadena could be a haven for others seeking comfort, knowledge, or just a good story. From the very beginning, Vroman's wasn't simply a place to buy books. Adam had a passion for photography, and the store also offered Kodak supplies alongside a diverse selection of literature. Over time, Vroman's became known not only for its extensive inventory, but for its founders' acts of kindness. One story, often shared in the store's lore, tells of how Mr. Vroman once lent money to a competitor, helping him start his own bookstore. It was this spirit of generosity that permeated Vroman's from its inception, a trait that continued long after Adam's death in 1916, when he left the store to his loyal employees. As Pasadena grew, so did Vroman's. It weathered the storms of time, surviving 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and more recently, the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. During World War II, in one of its most poignant moments, Vroman's donated and delivered books to Japanese Americans interned at nearby camps. Employees made the dangerous journey multiple times despite being fired upon by camp guards. These were not just deliveries of paper and ink. They were lifelines to a world beyond barbed wire fences, an affirmation of human dignity through the power of stories. Vroman's is so much more than just a bookstore. It's a stationery store, community gathering space, a coffee house, and even a wine bar named after its founding year, 1894. Vroman's has expanded in ways Mr. Vroman likely could never have imagined. The wine bar, nestled behind the newsstand on the main floor, marked a new chapter in Vroman's long story, a place where visitors can gather not just for books, but for connection. Yet it remains rooted in its core mission of serving the community. Vroman's hosts over 400 free events each year, from children's story times to craft classes, bake-offs, and author signings. Its storied guest list includes literary giants and public figures like Ray Bradbury, Salman Rushdie, John Didion, and even US Presidents Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter. It's a space where books spark conversations and where the power of words continues to bring people together. In 2008, Publishers Weekly named Vroman's the Bookseller of the Year, a prestigious award recognizing its innovation, vision, and success. The honor was a nod to the bookstore's legacy, but also to its adaptability. Over the years, it has expanded its offerings to include gifts, jewelry, cards, toys, and more, always with the same attention to detail and quality. Perhaps the most touching legacy of Vroman's, however, is its Vroman's Gives Back program. Through this initiative, the store donates a portion of its proceeds to local nonprofits supporting causes ranging from public radio stations to literacy programs, homeless services, and animal welfare. To date, it has donated over $830,000 to its community, a testament to the enduring spirit of philanthropy that Adam Vroman instilled in the store over a century ago. Even as Vroman's has embarked on the search for new owners, the spirit of this beloved literary landmark remains unchanged. At its heart, Vroman's is still a place where stories are treasured, where the community thrives, and where the love of books lives on. There is a deep nostalgia woven into its walls, a sense that this isn't just a store, it's a sanctuary, a gathering place, and the cherished part of Southern California's soul. In a world that moves so quickly, places like Vroman's remind us to pause, to preserve the magic of community spaces where connection happens over shared stories and warm cups of coffee. It would be such a gift to find owners who deeply value the tradition and understand the legacy of Vroman's, ensuring its future remains as bright as its past. We must hold on to this place, not just for Pasadena, but for all those who have found comfort and inspiration within its doors for 130 years. And here we are. Welcome to Vroman's. I'm so delighted to have Joel Sheldon here with me. Joel Vroman Sheldon III is the owner and president of Vroman's Bookstore, one of California's largest and oldest independent bookstores located in Pasadena. A graduate of Occidental College with a degree in psychology, Joel was a standout football player, earning small college All-American honors. Joel met his wife Jill at Occidental, and they have two children who also graduated from the college. While still an avid supporter of Oxy football, Joel has dedicated his career to property development and running Vroman's. As Joel is preparing for his retirement, Vroman's is currently in search of a new owner to continue its legacy. A passionate community leader, Joel has served on the Occidental College Board of Trustees and the Pasadena Community Foundation's Advisory Council. Through Vroman's Gives Back program and his personal efforts, he remains committed to supporting local causes and fostering a spirit of philanthropy. Please check out Vroman's website at www.vromansbookstore.com, or better, stop by the legendary store at 695 East Colorado Boulevard, Pasadena. Joel will take us along on his journey as he shares his life story and what it's been like to steward Vroman's Bookstore through the years. Hello, Joel.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you so much, first of all, for finding the time today to talk about the oldest and largest independent bookstore in Southern California.
Well, I always enjoy talking about it.
Thank you, thank you. And my first question is, Vroman's has been a part of your family for 3 generations. This is something absolutely incredible. And what are some of your earliest memories of Vroman's, and how did those experiences shape your vision for the bookstore?
Well, it's interesting. We've done a lot of things over the years, and my father was president before me, and he ran a distribution company, that is like a wholesaler, a textbook warehousing. And my earliest memories are going down at about 5 or 6 years old,
Wow.
theoretically helping and sweeping the floor. But what I really was, we had a kitchen down there. We served food. And the cook was a woman, very lovely woman named Mary, and her husband was Bob. And they basically babysat me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to have a good time. And that's another good memory about Vroman's. Not just that, but that Vroman's seemed to be, and I, just as a child, I was not working there, but it seemed to be a fun place to work. That is what my family didn't talk about, but portrayed. And those are my earliest memories, actually.
Wow, that is such a special memory. And what has been the most challenging change in the book industry during the time at Vroman's that you worked? So it's over 50 years. And how did you approach adapting the business?
Well, it's currently the internet, and it's Amazon and others. Of course, there's Walmart and there's Costco, and it's the volume large sellers that some time ago took away the bestseller list from independent bookstores because they discounted only the bestsellers. We once sold 10,000 copies, Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Wow.
That would probably be in the early 70s. And we used to sell huge amounts of the bestsellers. That business has gone for a long time. But the internet, the cultural change to internet shopping, and that's current, obviously, and that's a big challenge. The way we tried to approach it, we had some good history in computing. I won't go into it, but we knew how to warehouse, we knew how to ship, we knew how to keep track of inventory on computer, do all this stuff. We eventually had to close that business before Amazon came along. We closed it in the early 80s. And so I thought we knew a little bit about what Amazon was trying to do, but I didn't know how powerful they would become. So as the years went on and they grew and we were not making a commitment into the internet, we decided to make even a stronger community place and essentially try to make Vroman's as a bookstore something that was very hard to compete with.
Mm-hmm.
That has to do with our breadth of merchandise, our people. It has to do with our author signings. It has to do with we put in a wine bar so that it's a gathering place. 10 or 20 years ago, it was called a third place where people like to come. Not really to meet friends, but yeah, to meet friends and talk and whatnot. They'd bump into people. So that was our strategy, and it's worked very well up to the pandemic. The pandemic was a big, big, big challenge for all retailers, I'm sure. So that was our strategy. We play a little bit with the internet, but we were not willing to make a big investment in it, especially after Amazon got established. You need huge amounts of money and or courage to take on somebody like Amazon after they got established. So anyway, that's pretty much it.
Right, right. And I can see how internet has taken over, in the last few years, especially during the pandemic. But what you just said about Vroman's being a community space, a gathering place for people, it is something that we desperately need in such a huge metropolis as Los Angeles, because a lot of people who live here, do not have families because, their families are in other states, for example, or, they just find it hard to build a community for themselves. And I think that Vroman's, in a huge way, unlike Amazon or unlike other online platforms, provides that for people. And I want to, express my gratitude to you for thinking in this way about your store and not just having it a place for people to come and buy books, but also to gather people and make it warm and make them feel that they belong at that place and in the city.
Thank you. We have, by the way, before me, going back to Mr. Vroman, a long and deep connection to the community, not just in books, by the way, but our civic involvement. It's pretty special. It is. So we've committed to the local community for sure.
Yes, and the store has done so many charitable events. It's really uncanny how much the store, Vroman's, has given back to the community, back to the city.
You're absolutely right, especially if we go back a couple of generations and add it all up. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Yes, yes. Well, my next question is there a particular book that you have discovered at Vroman's that maybe holds a special place in your heart?
You're going to be surprised at this, and your listeners will be surprised, and any number of people will be surprised. It was actually an economics text I found in our business section by a professor named Paul Samuelson, and it wound up that it was basically the most prominent economics text used in college economic courses. And I picked it up just like a customer because I was looking for information about economics. I didn't take any business courses. I never thought I was going to be involved lifelong with Vroman's. Never talked about it with my father or family until I was in my early 20s, coming out of the Navy, which is kind of a personal story. But that was the first time we talked about maybe I could try a spot at Vroman's, and it was in shipping and receiving. But as I got involved, there were questions that I had to ask, could ask, or wanted to ask, and I kind of needed to know how business worked a little bit in order to talk with the key people in the business. So I spent a lot of time trying to catch up, magazines, books, textbooks, whatnot. But that book was the first time I walked into Vroman's, and all of a sudden I said, wow, maybe there's a book downstairs in the business section that can help me. I went down and found this book. I also found that I actually did understand about 80 or 90%, largely because I'd had the discussions with key people at Vroman's. And that was the first time I actually this is a strange thing for me to say, actually ever thought of myself as a student.
Mm.
I did the research. I chose the subject. I was curious. I wanted to go after it. So that has a very special place, not only because of that recognition as a young person, young adult, but position in Vroman's, position about the knowledge that was there and how much it meant to me. Now, I've read a lot of fiction, by the way, over the years, and I always liked the James Clavell series, Shogun and all that kind of stuff, and James Michener's histories of various areas or movements in the world and in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so those kind of stand out. I mean, I didn't do a lot of thinking about this, but they came to mind.
Very interesting. You know what you mentioned earlier, that basically Mary and Bob were babysitting you at the store when you were 6 years old and when you were sweeping the floor, and you felt that Vroman's was a fun place to work at. But then looks like it took some time in between before you actually made a decision to come and work at Vroman's, as you mentioned, after the Navy, and that, you picked up this book on economics. So quite an interesting effect that the store has had on your life. It's not that you knew back when you were a child that this is your path, that this is what you will be doing in your life, but somehow the store itself, without any pushing, led you to where you are at in your life right now after all these years of managing the store.
You're absolutely right in a variety of ways. One, I had a tremendous commitment to it. I had a tremendous commitment to my family. That is my mother. And Vroman's has done this. I mean, we've gotten 3 generations, 4 generations, and each generation had a grandmother that was maybe dependent on some of the profits from Vroman's, or family member in need, that kind of thing. And I was committed to try to make this thing continue and run. And it was a very challenging time when I came. My dad laid it out in a letter, but then we never talked about it after that. But it was a very challenging time. We had to close this warehouse. We had to throw out all of our computer equipment. And ultimately, all that fell to me as a relatively young, inexperienced. I was president of Vroman's by the age of, 38?
Mm-hmm.
Even younger. And without a lot of experience, really. But what it allowed me to do was to take those challenges, organize them as I saw them, and take the most important one first, second, third. And so I could learn, in some sense. I was being pushed, but I could learn at my own rate.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a test on Friday that I had to answer 10 questions for, but there was a test in the real world. We had to get rid of these things. We had to borrow money. How do you borrow money? What do you say to the bank? How do you make your case? And so Vroman's allowed me to grow at my own pace, although I have to admit that it pushed me, and it was a very fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
For me, somehow that's different than 3 professors telling you have to write this paper and that paper. And I was committed to it and worked very hard to see that it succeeded.
Wow. Like it was your university, real life.
Well, I had other focus when I was in college, which was not the business world particularly. So I never thought of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Very interesting how your life unfolded. And now, after 50 years of stewardship, what led you to the decision to sell Vroman's? And maybe there was some pivotal moment that you'd like to share that solidified your choice. And what emotions did you experience when you made this decision to sell the business? Because it must not have been easy to make this decision.
Oh, I don't know. Well, in some case, it kind of was. All right. I had become a student of these things, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I studied was family business transitions. Okay. And largely because I wanted to understand when I made the transition from a young person into the business and how it happened and what were the dynamics and that kind of stuff. So in the intervening years, I worked very hard at trying to plan a reasonable transition of management and maybe ownership in Vroman, and had 2 very detailed planning exercises, I guess you'd say, led by outside people.
Mm-hmm.
And we really had found a woman, relatively young at the time, who just turned into just the best manager I've ever seen.
Wow.
I really enjoyed her, wanted her to take over, and she certainly knew that. We tried to entice her. And then right before the pandemic, and she told us she loved the business like crazy and she didn't think she'd ever leave. And so we were all set. And then right before the pandemic, she took a job as the executive director of the American Booksellers Association.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly had benefits for her. I'm sure the salary was greater. The benefits and retirement were probably greater. But it really struck at how she could participate in the book industry. She loves books as much as anybody I ever have known, and is, I think, fascinated by the challenges of book selling and publishing and Amazon. So that, in some sense, was her dream job. And this was right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And that dashed my hopes at that time. And since that time, then the pandemic came along, and that was the worst period of Vroman's history, as far as I can tell. And that includes the world wars and stuff like that. There were some very depressions. There were obviously some difficult times that Vroman got through, but none of them were shut down for 2 months at a time, and all the rules changed, and you could only allow 25 people in, and you had to count people, and you had to do all these things, and the rules were always changing, and everybody was quite concerned.
Yes.
And during that time, and really just before, I had decided that we needed new ownership to bring more. It's hard to say energy because we have some great people, but there's nothing is called skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like somebody being willing to put some money at risk and then work hard to both retain that money and make more money and be creative and energetic, lead people and lead efforts. And so we decided that it would be best both for the current ownership, which is mostly my family, and the business itself, that we try to find that new ownership. And very candidly, in some sense, that wasn't a terribly difficult decision for me, because I really didn't see any other path.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to pass away eventually. It happens to everybody. None of my family, they're all very independent and doing very well, and there's nobody on the horizon that in the family structure. And it's not just my direct family. There are other, now limited other family members that own part of Vroman's. And there just wasn't anybody that seemed like a good candidate. And so we decided to go outside. And I just think it's the right decision. I mean, if you're pretty convinced that it's the right decision, I don't have a lot of difficulties at this time. There may well become moments when it's difficult. Remember, I closed down my father's business, and there were some nostalgic times because that's where I actually grew up and worked.
Yes.
So I've kind of done this a little bit before, although this is a much more public process. So far I'm doing okay with the emotions.
That's good. That's very important. I'm glad you're at such a place of acceptance, and that's wonderful. I have this interesting question to you. How do you think your ancestor, Alan Sheldon, and the founder of the store, Adam Clark Vroman, would feel about the sale of the bookstore?
I'm not sure about Adam Clark Vroman, although, by the way, when he died, he sold it.
Mm-hmm.
Then employees, actually, which is how my family, Alan Sheldon, who was my great uncle, and several other employees, about 8 employees actually bought little pieces of it. And it's quite an interesting story for he died in 1916. And Alan Sheldon, who was working and had been a godson of Mr. Vroman, as was my grandfather. Essentially, my great-grandfather was best friends with Mr. Vroman. So the 2 boys were orphaned at 3 and 12 or something, but Mr. Vroman always kind of kept track of them and knew where they were, and they'd visit him in Pasadena every once in a while. So eventually, Alan took a job with him. It's another long story about their history, but he came back, and they had to go to his brother, that is my grandfather, who was a banker up in Seattle, and they had to pool resources to buy the controlling interest of this business. Mm-hmm. So I think they would understand. They would want me to do a good job. They would want me to try to be realistic about it, move forward in the best interests of the family, the bookstore, and even the community as best I can. I think one of the reasons Vroman's was successful for so long was a bit of a division of responsibilities. Mm-hmm. That is, at least after Mr. Vroman, who ran everything. The Sheldons came more, they loved books. Don't get me wrong here. We all loved books. I grew up reading books and loving the bookstore. But they were oriented toward business. and they analyzed it as a business. We have letters between these two brothers. And Alan writing my grandfather saying, "Do you think it's a good opportunity? Do you think it's a good business? What do you think about it?" And they decided it was a good business, and they bought it, and it grew like crazy right after they bought it. Isn't surprising because it was one of the world's greatest population explosions between, say, 1915 and 1960. Phenomenal if you look back. And I've done the research and have given little talks about this. And so as they saw opportunity, they just kept growing the business and growing the business. Well, those opportunities change. They didn't have shopping malls. They didn't have computers. They didn't have the internet. They didn't, in those days, actually, there were about 5,000, 10,000 people in Pasadena when Vroman started the bookstore.
Oh, wow.
By 1920, there were probably 100,000. I'm not sure of that number because I don't have the graph in front of me. What I'm trying to say is I think they'd understand, and I hope they'd be proud that I'm analyzing it correctly and trying to do the best job I can. And another underlying principle in all of this is how you treat people. Okay. Treat people well. I'm sure all the people that I've ever come in contact with, a good percentage don't necessarily think that, because I've had to fire people because they either unethical, let me put it that way, or they weren't doing the job well. So you try to do the best you can, and treating people well, whether it be fellow owners or employees, customers, is very, very important. And so I think they'd also support me in that as I go through this process. Try to treat people well, Joel.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm still okay.
That's good. That's good. And Joel, what do you think you'll miss the most about being involved with Vromans on a day-to-day basis? And how do you plan to stay connected to the world of books and literature?
That's a really interesting question, because I don't think I'll stay connected with Vromans. I don't think I should. Will I still shop here? Sure. That's an interesting question. It's one that the answer I didn't fully form in my mind of all the questions that you gave me. Because in some sense, at least for a while, I really want to get away and relax. And I will read a lot. I know that. I'll probably read a lot about business. I'll keep up on all the local community affairs for a while, get involved in what issues I think might be important or that I have enough energy for. But I just want to kind of sit back and read and rest and enjoy the sunshine. So I really don't know how the connection with Vromans will continue.
Well, time will show. And my last question to you, Joel, if you could offer a piece of advice to the new owners, what would that be?
It would be pretty long, I guess, because there's a lot in the book business, a lot in retailing, and in the book business especially, a lot of detail. And so you have to pay attention. You have to be committed. You have to have passion. You have to find good people. You have to be a good planner. You have to have perseverance. And in the end, you do have to have profits. And under each one of those headings, there are subheadings about how important buying is, how important merchandising is, how important it is to track vital statistics so that you know where the business is going, what's selling, what's not selling. So I try, it's hard, but I basically say, just pay attention. You gotta be there and pay attention. What you pay attention to is the ownership and leadership's decision, because those change over time, of course. What the challenges really are, what's the next big challenge, and how to respond. But you got to keep your eye on it for sure.
Yes. And Joel, I want to thank you once again for the time that you took to have, this conversation with me. And I'm sure that the listeners will be curious, to find out about the history of Vromans and how you have been such an amazing steward for so many years. And I hope that in the next part of your life, you will just stay as curious as you have been, and then you will continue to be a student, because, it doesn't matter how old you are or where you're at in your life. I think continuing being a student and continuing being curious is something that keeps us going.
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you kind of summarized it that way, in a sense, not only for me, but for everybody, and potentially the new owners. So that's terrific. I appreciate it. And I always like these things because it does force me to review and formulate my responses to the questions. Yours were very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. And thank you once again. I already said that at the beginning. Thank you for creating this community. And I really hope that the new owners will continue to invest, finances and their energy into building it and make it into even more thriving community at the store and in the city of Pasadena. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Until next time. Thank you very much for tuning in to feel and experience Vroman's Bookstore with my special guest, Joel Sheldon. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It's an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. Next time, we'll ride the wave of music and transformation in Los Angeles, exploring how the city's vibrant energy intertwines with the journey from creative highs to personal healing. I cannot wait to dive into this inspiring adventure with you.
In the Mood for California, feel the soul of Old Hollywood.